Hello and good afternoon. Well, I've got that rail in place and I wanted to do a little demo for you. But I thought it might be interesting to just quickly go over a few things that one needs to bear in mind when doing these demos. So one of the very last things you fit is called a check rail. And if I zoom across, you can see here, this blue line with no rail in place is a check rail, and there's one over here. And it's on the same side, on the same place on this side as well. And if you've ever wondered what a check rail is, when a wagon or a locomotive goes through a point this way, there's only really one way it can go. The inside edge, you think of the two wheels here, the inside edge of this wheel is hitting or is guarded with this rail here. So as it goes, it just goes straight across that gap. Yeah. For the other direction though, there's nothing holding the wheels this way. So it's possible that as the wagon or the locomotive goes towards this V, that it twists ever so slightly and one of the wheels goes the wrong way, and then that will derail and it will just fall down in the middle. Because there's nothing holding it in exactly the right position. So the way that you mitigate against that is by using these check rails. So if you can imagine there was a rail in place there, as this wagon was moving, the inside edge of this wheel would be against this rail here, and it would ensure that it was not possible for one wheel to go the wrong side of the V, because as soon as it goes into this gap, if I just get a little pointer, you see there's a little kink there. It catches the back of the wheel. As soon as it enters there, it's captive. The flange on the wheel is captive through this whole length, which means it can't go the wrong side. Because I haven't got those fitted, I'm going to have to press this very gently towards this direction when I'm moving it either side of that V. And the same thing over here. The second thing I wanted to make someone aware of is that this particular slip, although it would be nice if it worked, it's really just a proof of concept. I wanted to see if I could build one. So there's no intention for this to go in and end up on a layout somewhere. Just built it just for fun, because that's what cool people do, right? And so one of the things that I didn't do, and maybe I should have done, is called a joggle. And the reason you'll have a joggle is as follows. You see this switchblade here that I'm moving with the tweezers. If I go in a bit, where that switchblade nestles up against this rail, it will never be wafer thin. There's always going to be a little lip, and that little lip is effectively going to narrow the gauge, because it means the wheel is going to have to the flange of the wheel is going to have to come inside here. It's going to be rolling against the inside of this, and then it's going to hit here, and it's going to have to move. And sometimes there's enough slack, and it will just be a bump as it goes across that. But sometimes if you don't file that flat enough, it ends up being a real problem, because the gauge gets narrowed too much and then you derail. The wheel rides, it can't go straight, so it goes up and it comes up, and then sometimes it drops back in. More often than not, however, it rolls up and then maybe it drops down into this gap over here, and then one wheel is going that way and the other wheel is going this way, and you derail. So one way to mitigate against that is to use what you can see here, which is a joggle. And you see the rail goes straight, then there's a little kink in it, and it goes straight again. And that's affected. I haven't got the piece. I've got a piece of brass somewhere, but effectively you put a piece of brass like in that kind of orientation, and you squeeze it with a pair of pliers. And the brass can be quite thin, and it just deflects the rail a little bit. So if you can imagine, if there was a switchblade here, it would nestle up right up nicely in that little recess. And if it wasn't there, then it's no big deal, because it's going to be just moved out of the way. So the inside edge, of the flange will be moving, and even though the gauge will be slightly wider for the width of a couple of sleepers, the back of the switchblade will be there to make sure everything's in place. So it's much better to be wider than narrower in this case, although you can't go too wide. So I haven't done that on this or this section here. So the chances of this working flawlessly is relatively slim. But as you can see, I can roll this and it moves through the curved turnout Oh, no, there we go. There. Fairly smoothly. Yeah. And if I place it, if I try and deflect this, here we go. So now it should. There's no. There's one piece of rail missing, which is this rail here, which is the other hand equivalent to this little piece of switchblade here. So it's not going to do anything because there's no rail there. So I'm tilting it slightly, but then once it gets onto the crossing, you know, it moves through nicely, which is really pleasing. I was fairly certain that wasn't going to work at all, but then we go live, testing live. That's the equivalent of running some code at a convention or something. And hoping it's going to work in front of all your crowd for the first time. We go onto this side. Does this one work? Yeah, it's a little bit tight. But overall, I'm quite pleased with how it's gone. It's not too difficult. I'm definitely going to be implementing these for real. The next stage is to add these switchblades and hit them in over here. And on this side, connect them in over there. The last piece of rail, and then the check rails, and then realistically it's done, and then it will probably just go in the bin. But anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Just for your note, the reason you put so much weight in this is that if you're kicking it around with a pair of tweezers, it's very easy for you to give it a nudge that's not parallel to the direction of travel. And you'll derail it. I found it so easy to derail this, even on points that worked fine with the locomotive. If I was trying to use my hand to nudge the wagon around, it would derail. So just dropping a few of these track gauges in gives it a bit of weight and keeps it on the track a bit better. Then you can be sure then that if it derails, it's derailing because of the track and not because you've knocked it in the wrong direction. So next update should have 2 switchblades connected up, the wing rails in, and it finished. Thank you.